Today's guest is Kian Golzari.
Probably always going to work in the family business, and luckily when I went to China I was like, nah, I want to be here.
He's a supply chain and product development expert who's personally sourced over 2,500 products.
Working in the factory also improves you as a product developer because you see how your products are made from start to finish.
He's worked with everyone, from the NBA to the Olympics to your favourite football players.
And at that time as well, we got the license for the London 2012 Olympics.
And he's helped scale brands from 0 to 8 figures in revenue.
These are all things that we can improve in your supply chain to sort of take you to the next level.
And we've got him in the studio today to discuss how and when brands should graduate from Alibaba to the factory floor.
If you're not visiting your factories, you're not really building a brand, you're just gambling from a laptop.
What a winning supply chain strategy actually looks like in 2025.
There's so many different areas in your supply chain where you can optimize.
And how brands can reliably cut product costs without compromising on quality.
You have to have the absolute best product from the best supplier at the best price.
And his value-first networking approach that built him high-level relationships with some of the industry's most serious decision makers.
And by providing a bit of value, was able to make good connections, then got introductions to people at the club for partnerships.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. How long have you been in Dubai?
5 years.
Okay. What was the kind of move process? Was that pre-COVID?
During, so it was so simple. I was living in LA pre-COVID, and as soon as it hit, I kind of realized I needed to get out of there. I moved back to Scotland where I grew up, and then I was just in my apartment in Scotland, and then we got to December and it was getting very cold. So one of my best mates lives in Dubai. I came here on holiday, and then while I was here, there was an announcement. It was a second lockdown in the UK. I'm like, I'm not going back home, so I just stayed. And when you come to Dubai, you get, at the time, it's like a 30-day tourist visa. And I was like, right, I want to stay longer than this. And they were like, to stay longer, you need to apply, set up a business so you can get a business visa. And I didn't really, I was shocked at how easy it was. They just said that, like, what do you do? Or like, consultant, what's your company? I just put my YouTube channel. They were like, all right, stamp. There you go. Here's your business.
Okay.
Visa 2 years. I was like, all right, I guess I live in Dubai now. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
And do you think you'll stay for the long term?
Yeah, I mean, you never know what will happen like long term, but I think for the short to medium term, this is definitely the place that I want to be in, and you never know like how things might change, but I think I'll definitely be here for, it's the first time that I've lived somewhere where I feel really comfortable that I could build a foundation. So for example, like I grew up in Scotland, I was never quite 100% happy there because of like weather and other aspects. I moved to China, I lived in China for a few years. I loved it in terms of like personal development and growth and excelling in my career in like product development and supply chain. But you know, I never wanted to live full time in China, and the pollution was really bad, and there was other aspects like government control and things like that. And then I moved to the States, LA, and then I sort of realized after being there that they had their own problems and certain things I didn't align with. And then I moved to Dubai, and I was like, for the first time, I could like take a deep breath and be like, I could really see myself living here. So I've got my own place now, and I feel that like I could really, you know, start a family here and meet the right person here, and like, you know, like, so that it's the first time I've lived somewhere I felt really comfortable that I could stay for the long term.
So it's kind of across work, social life, personal life, all these factors.
Yeah, I think Dubai is like the Joker card in a deck, that it can be anything you want it to be. So if you're like a party person, it's got the best nightclubs. If you're an entrepreneur, it's got a very good network of entrepreneurs. If you're a gym and fitness person, it's got great healthy foods and the best gyms in the world. Like whatever you want to do in life, you can achieve the best version of yourself here, whereas there's not many places in the world where you can do that.
Okay. Any downsides that you don't like, or?
To just the air quality and the lack of nature, which is a small downside for the amount of advantages that we get. So I can live with that. And if I ever want to experience a bit of nature, I can take a short flight. Emirates is the best airline in the world, and it's so accessible, and you can be wherever you want in a few hours. So
okay, interesting. You mentioned it there. Your kind of backstory. So I know you spent a long period of time in China. Do you mind just kind of starting from days in the family business to the China kind of stint?
Yeah, sure.
Talk through your kind of story.
Well, luckily for me, you know, my dad set up a brand called Highlander, camping and outdoor brand, and he went out to China for the first time early 90s. So as a kid, I just always saw my dad going to China, and I was always curious, you know, what happens in China. He's coming back with all these like weird gifts, all these cool stories. So like the seed was planted at a young age, and then even some of his suppliers came to visit him in Scotland, and they would bring their kids. So when I was like 6, 7 years old, I was playing with like Chinese kids as well, same age as me. And then fast forward, when I graduated university, November 1st, 2010, I went to China for the first time with my dad, and those kids that I was playing with when I was 7 years old was now running their dad's factories, and I was now doing business with those guys. So it kind of started like really, really early for me, and luckily I loved it. And after the first Canton Fair I went to, I was supposed to come back home to Scotland, but decided to stay. Ended up staying for 3 months, set up an office there, went back to Scotland, got my things, and then moved back to China. And in that time, that's when I visited over 500 factories, and just this like passion for product development, like the backpack example that I gave you, I just saw that across so many different products, and I'm like, I need to learn more. Like, I love this, because like for me personally, I always feel like if I'm not growing, I'm suffering, and I have to constantly be growing. And every time I went into a factory, I was growing. Every time I went to a factory, I was learning something. So I was like, I just got addicted to it, if you know what I mean. And I feel like at that age, I was 21 or 22 when I moved to China. That's that age in your life where you're just willing to try new things, and you just constantly want to improve and want to learn, and you just got so much energy and appetite for learning something new and becoming the best version of yourself. So yeah, it was the best time of my life.
What was the plan before that? So you mentioned you just kind of went out to China on a whim, basically.
Yeah.
What were you originally going to be doing?
I mean, I was probably always going to work in the family business,
Okay.
and luckily when I went to China, I was like, nah, I want to be here, and then I just moved there. So rather than working behind the desk, I was like, I just want to work in these factories.
Okay. And at that initial stage in China, was that kind of working on behalf of the family business, improving the product and the supply chain for them?
Yeah, exactly. So we have a wide variety of different categories of product, from backpacks, tents, sleeping bags, outdoor furniture, outdoor cook sets. And at that time as well, we got the license for the London 2012 Olympics.
Wow.
So I was in charge. And so we got that license in 2010, and that's when I went to China for the first time. So I was in charge of doing 9 different categories of product for London 2012, which is my first time in China, first time visiting factories. It was a big responsibility, but obviously I'm very grateful to my dad to giving me that responsibility, and for like mentoring me and stuff like that. And then it just sort of grew and grew from there. I just started working with different retailers, brands, licenses. And then I eventually left the family business in 2018 when I felt like I wanted to just go and do more. Like, I know I'm very good at this now, but I want to sort of see what's my ceiling. I want to see like how far I can push myself, and what different brands and retailers and licenses I can work with, and how can I make a name for myself. So that was a tough decision, but it worked out really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of initial stage in China must have been very tough. So you had a lot of responsibility, new country, new job. Like, that's a lot going on. How did you kind of get up to speed?
Honestly, just I never thought of it that way. Just having fun, you know. I was just like, I just want to get out to as many factories as possible. I want to build relationships with big factory bosses. I want to be developing winning products, and the products that I was developing were selling very well. So I was like, whatever this is working. So, and I was making good friends in China, making very good connections, and like some of my best friends are suppliers that I've known for more than 15 years. So I never quite put any pressure on myself, and I never felt any pressure from like the family business or anything like that. I just I loved it. It was performing well, and yeah.
Okay.
Nice and easy.
And what was that learning process like though? Like, new country, new language, new industry?
Honestly,
how did you learn?
I arrived in Shanghai, I found an apartment, put my bags down, I walked to the closest bar, played pool, made a friend, and then he introduced me to his friends, went out on the weekend. That's how I made connections in China. So I never and the social media wasn't really that big then. I don't even think I had like Instagram at that time. So I just sort of made friends like the old school way. And then same with like factory bosses, like just made connections from the fair, sent emails, went to visit factories, made good connections there. So every city I went to, you know, there's not many like foreigners in these cities where they have factories, but you see other foreigners in the hotel, which they might be a buyer from like Brazil or Germany or USA. You make friends with other buyers like in bars or restaurants and hotels, and then you share like industry secrets and stuff like that. So it was a different time, but it was so much fun, and like I just kind of took it in stride, and it never felt tough, to be honest.
Okay. And how long did you spend in China overall?
I lived there for I think 4 or 5 years, and then I eventually decided to come back home because the pollution was really bad at the time.
Okay.
Now China's beautiful, like a lot of EVs, blue skies, a lot of nature, but back then it was very industrial, lots of smog, lots of pollution, and it just didn't really feel like the place to settle. And I still go back to China like every 3 or 4 months, but I just didn't want to live there anymore. And that's when I started to do a bit of work with the NBA. So I was going back and forth quite a lot to LA, so I just decided to sort of plant myself there and then just sort of see, because I believe my favorite phrase is like proximity is power. You have to put yourself in proximity of the people and places that will get you the best results. And for me, wanting to learn product development and supply chain, China was the best place for me. But then I also wanted to work with like the leagues and the players and the managers and the athletes and the big brands, and a lot of them were in LA. So once went there, I had a few successful meetings. I was like, right, this is where I need to be, and then just base myself there.
Okay, and so the work in LA and the NBA stuff, was that after you've left the family business?
Yeah, exactly.
What prompted that decision to leave?
Just I had to find out what's my ceiling, because I felt with the family business I was developing a lot of products which were going very well, but they were just being sold in sort of independent retailers in the UK, and the order quantities were great, but I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to work with an online brand which could really scale things, and that's where I really want to test myself. So I was like, I just need to work with a lot of different brands and a lot of different categories of product in a lot of different sales channels, whether it be Shopify, Kickstarter, Amazon, and I just want to deliver the absolute best product at the best price, at the best quality, and I know I can do that, and if I do that for these big brands, then we'll achieve like massive success. So I was able to supply the NBA within like 6 months of leaving the family business, which sort of gave me further like confirmation that I'm good at what I do, and I can really reach new heights. So that was a great experience.
Very cool. How was that transition? So from family business to kind of going out on your own to signing like the MBA and starting work there. What was the process like?
Interesting. I didn't really feel it as like a transition. It just kind of like, I was like, this is what I want to do, put my mind towards it, and then it just started falling into place. And like, the way I got into the NBA, they're all different. Like from working for the Olympics, that was like a tender process. That was my brother. Like he was in charge of sales at the time, and then he applied for the tender to win the contract for the London 2012 Olympic Games. Went from 200 companies to 100 to 50 to 20 to 5, and he's going to London doing interviews, presentations the whole time. And then we got the contract, and then that opened up the door to get into a lot of retailers because we had the official licensed product. Retailers would take the licensed product, but then we would show the family business products. We would have like 2-3 products, then that would be successful. It'd get to 5, 10, 12, 15, 20 products. And then from there, with the NBA, I just sort of sent DMs to former players and who had connections with the league. And then I said, I'm working with product development, I'm working in China, I've got access to retailers. Can you get the NBA license? So they got the license, I got the products, approached the league, got some of the players involved, got them to post. So it all kind of like, it was just kind of like, I like chess, right? Because like chess, you have to think of like the good players think about their next moves, the great players think about their next 5 moves, and like the world's best players think about their next 10 moves. And I was like, okay, I'm here and I want to supply the NBA. What are the next steps I need to do? I need to find players, need to get in contact with them, need to provide value, need them to acquire the license, need me to supply the product, need to go to LA for meetings. And I'm just like, step by step, this is what I need to do. And then just got it done. So it all just sort of felt quite seamless.
It's quite organic, like a bit of a snowball.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Because I know the value I can provide, and I know what doors need to be opened, and as long as we can make those connections, then it's going to happen.
Okay. I want to talk now about something you've been doing recently with some big Spanish footballers. Can you just talk to kind of how that came about and
Yeah,
what
sure.
you've been doing?
Yeah, so I started to work directly with Real Madrid and Barcelona and some of the players, which was a friend of mine who's got a business here called IDG, I Design Gold, in Dubai, and he makes like custom gold iPhones for the players. But we actually gifted the entire Real Madrid and Barcelona team with gold iPhones, and we've got sponsors on board to sponsor the phones, and then so we got to deliver and meet and greet with the players, get to meet them in their hotels in Saudi when they were playing each other in a cup final. But that process of like the meet and greet with the players, we were able to establish connections. So I made friends with some of the players, the agents, went back to see them in Madrid and Barcelona for meetings. Because when you get a bit of FaceTime with them, you explain a little bit about what you do in sort of product development, supply chain, and then started sharing things with me about some brand deals that they've got going on. I sort of gave my insight, and they're like, can you come for a meeting? And then got invited to some of the games, met the managers of players, the agents, went to like the games with their parents in the box. So like, it was very organic as well, that like I always believe you have to provide value first, and by providing a bit of value was able to make good connections, then got introductions to people at the club for partnerships. So things are kind of like flowing in that direction, and we're working on some things right now. So it was just kind of like whenever, like, I always think like, how can I provide value to this person before asking for anything? So like, normally you meet someone of status and you would just kind of ask for an autograph or ask for a photograph, and then like that's it. But I much prefer to say like what I can do or what I'm about or what I can provide, and if they're interested, then they'll ask follow-up questions, which we were able to do. So yeah, that's all growing organically as well. And luckily, I'm a big fan of football, so I really, really enjoy. And that's the hardest thing, actually. You know what? Like, admiring and looking up to these guys and watching all their games, but you just gotta like sort of chill, like
Relax.
yeah, just be like, you know what, like I can't come off as a fanboy because even though I am, but I've got to stay cool and composed because like I actually want to work with these guys as well, and I'll lose all leverage if I'm like, oh, can I get an autograph? You know, so it's that was the hardest thing. But now actually I've got signed jerseys and all that by all the players now as well, so that comes later.
Okay, so just wait, be patient.
Yeah.
Okay, what would you put this success down to? Like, obviously this is, you know, years in the making.
Yeah.
But why would you say it's starting to happen now? Like,
I think like having a long-term vision and also putting in your 10,000 hours, because like I'm able to get into these rooms and I'm able to have these conversations because I've mastered a skill, and it's because I worked on product development, sourcing and supply chain, and that's the only thing I did for like 15 years in a row, you know, and I didn't really put my attention somewhere else. I didn't start other businesses. I just focused on this, and having spent time in over 500 different factories and developing over 2,500 products, like I really know this stuff, and I don't know anyone else which is putting that amount of time into this, and then starting the YouTube channel and educating people on this. I think that like learning it yourself is great, but then teaching it more solidifies your knowledge as well, and then just being able to put that time in. But like if you'd asked me this question like, you know, 2-3 years into my sourcing and supply chain journey, I don't think I'd be able to have these conversations with NBA and players and stuff like that, because I hadn't done enough work yet to get as good as I wanted to be. But having put in those like 10,000 hours and having that 15 years experience, there's nothing within supply chain that I can't solve, because I've had so many problems like thrown at me. So for anyone in any industry of product, like to add value and to get into these rooms, you just have to put in your time and to learn your skill and master your craft, and then you can get yourself in these rooms and then get any sort of opportunity that you want.
Okay, how important is communication as a skill?
Very good, very, very important. I would say that a lot of my stuff has come through like Instagram DMs. You know, depending on who you want to work with, you have to sort of find who those people are, and like I said, provide value first. Like for anyone in their business, like there's probably a certain influencer which can skyrocket your business, and you can reach out to those people. But it's very important not to be like, hey, I've got an opportunity for you. It's more so I would analyze that person and find out what is their pain point, and then solve that pain point for them, and then ask for whatever you want. So for example, there might be an influencer you want to work with. You go on their website, you find out they've got a really bad like personal brand website. So why not just go and build them an amazing website, and then say to them, hey, I noticed that your website was like okay, so I built you this new one, check it out. And they're like, whoa, that's incredible, thank you so much. What can I do for you? Well, actually, I'm working on this new product, and it'd be great if I could send you a sample to get some feedback on it. Boom, door open. Like, but you have to provide value first.
So even from that kind of initial exchange, you're just looking at value. Yeah.
There's a brand that I've always wanted to work with, and it's kind of in process now, so I don't want to say who it is. But before, rather than messaging them and say like, hey, I'm good at product development, let me make something for you, I just made the product and I just sent it to them, and they were like, this is awesome, how do we work together? Yeah. So I had to put in a lot of work, like a lot of samples, a lot of testing, a lot of spec sheets, finding suppliers, negotiating price. I probably had to do like, you know, 100 hours of work before sending that initial message. But when I sent the message, it was done. Okay. So like I would always emphasize, you know, doing the work first and providing value first if there's anything that you want out, because all these people are busy. They don't have time to sort of look you up and see what you do and where can you provide value. They just say like, what's your offer? Cool, makes sense, let's do it.
Okay. I imagine you've got a lot of stuff coming across your desk in terms of like new opportunities. How do you A, filter through the noise, and B, decide how to kind of allocate your attention and your time?
Yeah, that's something I struggled with before, because I said yes to everything and I just overwhelmed myself. And as an entrepreneur, you always think that you have freedom because you're working for yourself, but essentially you say yes to all these opportunities and you become a slave to your calendar. But I recently realized that there's a lot more power in saying no than there is to saying yes. So rather than saying yes to everything, I just kind of said no to everything, and then if something really, really aligned, well, then I've got the energy to take it on because I've got the time. And it also really depends, like, you know, what stage of life that you're in, because when you're a lot younger, you got the energy, depending on like what your sort of financial situation is like. You know, you might just want to grind and grind and grind, but like I'm at a stage now where I can just pick and choose my projects, and luckily I'm doing ones which are very, very impactful. And I kind of have like 3 main criteria for like selecting a project, which is I look at the business and as like the horse and the jockey. Like the horse is the actual like product the
Yeah.
business, and the jockey is a person running the business. And if the person running the business is someone that I get along with and we have good values and share common values, then I'm like, I know this will be successful. But I've been a part of businesses where like the business was great, but the leader wasn't, and then we clashed, and then it didn't succeed. And then is it in an industry which is scalable? And then is it a product which I can massively improve as well? So if it matches those three criterias, then it's an opportunity that I'll really consider.
Okay, so you touched on it there. Kind of what you're doing is you're picking up existing businesses and improving the product essentially. What other ways can people work with you?
Um, Most people just reach out actually from seeing my YouTube videos, and then I've got an email address there, hello@sourcingwithkian.com, or they reach out through LinkedIn or Instagram DMs. And a lot of people just ask for help, and I wanted to have something available for those people. So I do have a school community, which is just Sourcing with Kian.
Is
And
that more kind of generalized knowledge?
it's training courses on product development, sourcing, supply chain, and every single aspect of the sourcing journey you can imagine. There's documents, templates, forms, resources, contracts, everything. And then I do weekly calls there as well.
Nice.
Like twice a week, do calls with different time zones as well. So anyone which needs help every step of the way, it's kind of like a done with you. Like you just say what your issue is, and I would like help draft messages to suppliers in order to get the best results. But everyone learns at the same time, and the calls are all recorded. So that school program is really cool. I really enjoy it. But the stuff that I get involved with, I just kind of hand pick and hand choose based on those three criteria. If it's a business that I can really improve and scale, and we get along with the business owner,
And you'll
then
go like deeper into those kind of projects.
yeah, that's the ones I'll put in a lot of time into.
Okay. I want to kind of jump straight into it. So we are filming this on the 10th of April.
Yeah,
I think about a week ago, Trump came out with Liberation Day.
yeah.
As of today, can you just run through kind of what was announced in that and where we're at currently in the tariff situation?
Yeah, so the tariff situation is pretty chaotic, especially for anyone who like imports from China. But it's important to understand that no matter what the tariff rate is right now, they're always going to go up and down. So Trump, when he was in office in 2018, he put a 25% tariff on Chinese goods, and that was because of he was annoyed that Chinese companies were stealing American IP. The Biden administration kept that 25% tariffs. Then, before Trump came into office for his second term, he said, on day one, when I get in, I'm going to put a 10% additional tariff on China because of fentanyl inflow. And then he honored that. He added that 10%, and then he moved it up to 20%. And then China retaliated, and they've added on tariffs as well. And then the tariffs, he put an additional 34%, which he called reciprocal tariffs. And that Liberation Day was putting reciprocal tariffs on China and the rest of the world for what they put on American goods going in. So Vietnam, I think, got like 40% tariffs as
Yep.
well, because they have 80%. They've called it reciprocal tariffs and also like currency manipulation as well. So if there's anything that they do against the US dollar or against US goods coming into their country, Trump has given a reciprocal tariff, meaning he's going to put that on them as well coming into America, but he's done it at half of what they've done it, so it's still relatively fair. And if you think about it from a macro perspective, if you're an American citizen, what he's doing actually makes sense, because it's unfair of what's happened to America. Like, other administrations have allowed these countries to get away with it. And as a result, these countries are not going to lower their tariffs on American goods entering those countries. And then as a result, America can export more and improve their deficit and all that sort of stuff. So what he's doing actually makes sense. But it has sparked a trade war because now certain countries retaliate. And as of today, he's dropped the reciprocal tariffs on the rest of the world apart from China just for 90 days. But for China, it's increased that the tariffs total now 104%. And then as of today, it's put up to 125%. But now it's getting very messy because the World Trade Organization has to get involved and then now try and sort this out. And anyone who's involved in e-commerce or importing products from China and sending it to the USA is essentially now a pawn in a chess match. And it's egos at this stage, right? Because Chinese culture is all about, saving face. And, if America slaps a big tariff on China and China's like, okay, cool, we're going to reduce the tariff on America, they just look weak. And then if Trump puts this massive tariff on China and says, actually, no, I'm going to reduce it from 100 down to 20%, then he looks weak. So neither side want to back down. And it's like, the important thing to consider here is that this is not like the number one nation going against the number 37 nation, where that number 37 nation, like let's just say it's Spain, can be like, okay, cool, fair, right, we'll reduce it. It's 1 and 2, and like it's America and China will at some point overtake America. And it's like America doesn't want to give up that power. They have the global reserve currency. There's so many factors that play in this, so it's not as simple as like, okay, cool, yeah, let's sit down and resolve this between us. It's very public now, right? So it could be resolved in the short to medium term, but there's going to be a time of disruption right now where a lot of brands are affected.
Okay. Can you just talk through how brands are affected and potentially what they can do to minimize it?
Anyone who's like importing products from China, like your goods are now much more expensive as a result, right? So the first thing is that like have a look at your profit margins to be like, can I absorb this additional tariff? Because any product with a certain amount of innovation, then you can charge a higher retail price for your product. So if your cost of goods is $10 and you're selling it for 100, but your cost of goods has now gone from 10 to 20, you can still absorb it. You're still very profitable, so you can just stay there, no problem, ride this out. But if you're on a very low profit margin and then your costs have now doubled and maybe now your goods are at a loss, it doesn't really make sense for you to import this product anymore. So your production halts. Or you can find a factory in another country, but that takes a bit of time. The first step I would advise everyone to do is have a look at your numbers, look at your profit margins, see if you can absorb it. 2, don't burn any bridges with your existing factory. Talk to them, because if it affects you, it affects them as well. If you're not ordering, or if you're ordering less, then they're producing less, so their output reduces as well. So if your cost of goods, if your tariff has gone up by 100%, I would say to the supplier, can you share this with me 50-50? I'll pay 50%, you pay 50%, but in that way we get to continue selling what we're selling and our orders won't be affected. And then when it goes back to normal, we'll be fine. So it's a very good time to negotiate with your supplier. And then it's important, regardless of what the tariff situation is, because it's always going to go up and down, is to have a China plus one strategy, meaning what is the next best country outside of China to manufacture your goods. And to find that out, because a lot of people think, oh, I'll go to Bangladesh, I'll go to Turkey, I'll go to Vietnam, I'll go to Myanmar, maybe just where they like to go on holiday. But actually, it depends on where's the raw material of your goods being produced. So India is very strong for cotton, canvas, leather, wood, handcraft. So if you've got a wooden side table, well, India's probably going to be pretty good for it. If you're doing like apparel, Sri Lanka is very good at like gym wear, athletic wear, all that. So like there's so many different countries have got different advantages, and you can use a website like importyeti.com, totally free, and you can find out where your competitors manufacture their goods. ChatGPT is actually very useful as well in terms of recommending which country your goods should be manufactured in based on the raw materials of your product, and it can give you some good suggestions as well. So I would start to look at alternate suppliers as well, but the main thing is that like, how long can you ride this out? Because a lot of people are going to stop selling and a lot of people are going to drop off, and future competitors might not get into the category. But if you can stay there and maintain that rank while other people fall off, you'll benefit from a lot more sales. And then when things go back to normal at a certain stage, then you will have maintained that number one position and you'll have a dominant market share. So it's just like stay in the game as long as possible by talking to the suppliers, looking at other countries, and understanding your costings to know how profitable you are.
Okay. In terms of the kind of costing side, do you think a lot of this tariff situation is just going to lead to inflation for US customers?
I think it's going to force people to really understand their numbers, because I've talked to a lot of e-commerce brands before and asked them like, how profitable are you? And they're like, oh, we're like a 7-figure seller. I'm like, I don't care what your revenue is, like, how profitable are you? Oh, it's about 40%. Yeah, but exactly. And is that gross or net? It's like, I think it's gross. I was like, you have to know down to the cent how profitable you are. And then it's like there's so many different places in our supply chain where we can save like 1 or 2%, by being able to put more goods on a pallet by changing our cart dimensions, and then therefore being able to put 300 units rather than 200 units on a pallet. So therefore storage on a unit is less. Storing goods in our manufacturer's warehouse, storing goods in our freight forwarder's warehouse. There's so many things we can do to save 1 or 2%, like changing materials here and there. It's like the Sky cycling team. They didn't have the fastest cyclists, but they won a lot of tournaments because they looked at every angle of the bike and they're like, where can we improve 1%? It's the same in your supply chain. Just look at every aspect of it and see where can we save 1 or 2%, and that amounts to something pretty significant afterwards. But in the short term, yes, I think it will cause, because people still want to buy these goods, but are they willing to pay the higher level of the cost, right? And now you're going to find out the price elasticity of your product. And that kind of depends on the level of the innovation of your product. Because if it's just a bread and butter product and everyone can do it and there's a lot of suppliers that you can go to, then like, you'll be massively affected. But if you have a good brand, if you have some IP protection, if you've got some molds and toolings, if you've got patents, like you now have leverage, you have protection that you can raise raise your cost, and there's not really other places that people can go. So this is where like the white label sellers versus the brand developers and product innovators will separate themselves, and one side will be greatly affected and the other one's not as much.
Okay. You talked about optimizing the supply chain. I do want to come onto that, but I want to stick with the kind of tariffs point. Do you think the goal of this is to reshore manufacturing back to the US, and do you think it will be successful?
I think that's one of Trump's goals, but it's not a short-term thing, right? So if you put these massive tariffs on, which were implemented immediately, like you need years to
Yeah.
then get this like machinery and tooling and set up. But what China has and what other country has have are like low cost labor, and not only low cost labor, but a low cost skilled workforce, right? Which these guys are very, very good with sewing and machinery and technicians and all that. But like a skilled worker in America would be maybe 8 to 10x the labor cost of someone in China. And China have got 10,000 of them like in one city or
Yeah.
in one factory, right? Whereas like America, it's hard to get all those people together. So it's not as easy as, oh, let's just set up production here. I think you have to look at the products or the categories of product that they want to reshore and be like, is this product labor intensive or is it machine intensive? Because if it's like a t-shirt, then it's a lot of cut and sew, it's a lot of working with your hands, it's a lot of humans. But if it's like a car assembly line, then it's a lot of parts just being assembled by machines. So you can invest heavily into machinery to then have a good production line and production facilities for like machine intensive products. But it's very, very hard to do that for labor intensive products. So you might still want to outsource the labor to like other countries around the world, particularly in Asia,
Okay.
but then reshore production for other categories.
Do you think the US has the capability to do that and has thought this through to fix some of these structural changes?
I think he's doing this to reduce the US deficit, because the US is in a lot of debt, like trillions of debt, right? And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And the previous administration is printing a lot of money. So I think this is one of the strategies of how to reduce that, because if they can claim more income from tariffs and then they can receive more from exporting their goods at a lesser tariff rate and encourage more export from the US, this will help that deficit massively. And at the end of the day, I think it's also just a negotiation tactic, because the tariffs were used to protect US IP, then reduce the inflow of fentanyl. The tariffs on Mexico and Canada were on immigration crisis at the borders. So like he's using tariffs as a way to hurt countries to get them to do what he wants in terms of US interests. So I actually agree with, and you kind of need a leader like that to take action, because the previous administration were like failing horribly. But it's hurting in the short term and a lot of businesses. And it's like, as a result of the tariffs, right, the cost of goods go up, then less people buy it, then the business becomes less profitable, then they let people go. So unemployment in your nation goes up as a result of you trying to improve your trade deficit, but now more people are unemployed, and that causes its own problems. So like there will always be a cause and effect, but I think there has to be short-term pain for a long-term solution. It's just unfortunate that the importers of US brands are feeling that short-term pain.
Yeah. Okay. And also, can we talk a bit about de minimis? So that's been, I think it's next month. It's due to be suspended, right?
I think that was immediately.
Okay.
And de minimis value, for anyone who doesn't know, is that like previously you could send one packet like from China direct from your factory to your customer, and if the value of the product was less than $800, there'd be no import duty. But that was a way why like Temu and all these companies were like sending really, really cheap products. But it was also like the crowdfunding industry, like Kickstarter. You would have backers all over the world, and it would go straight from your factory direct to the final backer, and you would get around these tariffs. So for example, the tariff on a backpack was around 42% before these new tariffs came in when Trump came back in. So if you've got a $100 backpack, now you're paying $142 because of the tariffs. But if I now send that backpack by air, de minimis, like from the factory direct to the customer, then there's no duty. So the duty saving of $42 is more than the cost of the freight to courier that. So it makes sense to fulfill it individually. So now that's been taken away. A lot of brands which were just fulfilling by air direct from overseas to their final customer, now that's been removed as well.
What can they do to get around that, or is there no kind of workaround?
Now they'll just have to ship it by container or absorb the tariff cost.
Okay. And again, is that kind of passed on to consumers? And again, you see if you've got price inelasticity.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Final kind of question on this specific piece is, does this harm China's kind of position as the number one supplier in the long term?
Yes, but I don't think they mind because having spent like 15 years in China, I can see that they've got a massive growth in their middle class,
Okay.
meaning like there it used to just be like the ultra wealthy and the ultra poor, and there was very little middle class, right? But as a result of China's growth and like people going to university and then getting like jobs in like corporate and banking and stuff like that,
Hmm.
they're struggling to get a workforce, that low cost labor, into the factories, right? And like someone coming out of high school would be like, well, why would I work in a factory when I can work in a KFC, a Pizza Hut, a Starbucks, a bar, a restaurant, a nightclub?
Yeah.
I could just chill out on my phone all day in a coffee shop rather than work in a factory. Working in a factory is not fun. It's
Yeah.
a lot of work, right? And then it's often not in like nice places either. So China have got an aging population and they're struggling to get that young population into the factory. And then that older population, as they retire or pass away or whatever, that is not then recycling back
Yeah.
into there. But what I've seen is that the workforce is now moving more and more inland. So when I used to go to China 15 years ago, I would land in Shanghai or land in like Hangzhou or Guangzhou and just go straight to the factory.
Hmm.
But now it's like I land in those cities and I get a 4 hour bullet train into the countryside, and that's where those factories are. So the workforce is moving more and more rural. So when like you say that the production's kind of moving out of China and going to those other countries, I think they're okay with that because they don't have the workforce necessarily in the long term,
Hmm.
because their country has established so much that they can now focus on other industries like the tech industry, AI industry, like corporate industry, like legal, law,
Higher value
doctors. Yeah.
domestic.
So like these jobs weren't as readily available
Yeah.
15 years ago as they are today. So they're building up their country in other ways. So they don't mind to send jobs or factory work to Vietnam, Bangladesh, Cambodia, Myanmar, and those Chinese factory bosses will go to those countries and set up production lines, pay for the factory, train the workers, but they'll export out of those lower cost countries.
Okay. There's a bunch of interesting stuff that I want to dig into on that. First question is, in terms of moving inland, is that to reach kind of essentially a poorer population that they can then put through the factory system?
Yeah, mainly because like the corporate jobs are going into the cities, and then
So that the city workers are becoming higher skilled. They don't want to work in the factory, so they're going to the countryside to get the next gen.
yeah, and also like the factory work was causing quite a bit of pollution as
Okay.
well, and it was polluting the cities. And when I first moved to China, like people were wearing masks, like,
Hmm.
and this was like 10 years before COVID, and they were wearing masks because of the pollution, not because of like sometimes because I was living in Shanghai and have an office in Ningbo, but when I walked down the street, sometimes I couldn't see 10 meters in front of me, and that's because
Wow.
the pollution was so bad.
Yeah.
But by moving those factories more and more inland, they're now keeping the cities a lot more cleaner, and the cities are quite green. And there's a larger workforce there which are able to work in the factories, and it's also a lower cost workforce as well.
Okay. And am I correct in saying that you're thinking like, China kickstarted their economic growth with exports over time? They'll go to higher value industries and more of it will be kind of domestic consumption and
For sure. Yeah.
different industries.
I mean, China are leading the way with AI right now as well.
Yeah.
And they're, building like film studios to compete with Hollywood, and the BYD stock price is performing
Yeah.
much better than Tesla.
Yeah.
So like electric cars are killing it. So like in all aspects, they're doing better.
Yeah.
So and yeah, so they can move away from factory work more now.
I want to talk about your time in China in a second, but my final question on this is, you mentioned kind of these China plus one
Hmm.
countries. Are these factories and kind of what's going on in these countries, are they Chinese owned? And is this a state initiative
So
to kind of
yeah,
spread it
it's
out?
a good question. Some of them are. So like when you walk down the Canton Fair, like they'll say like it'll be Chinese companies, but they'll say factory in Vietnam, factory in Bangladesh, factory in Cambodia, because they know that they're going to lose customers to these countries. So why not just go and set up
Yeah.
production in those countries anyway, and you can continue to work with these factories, but now like under their ownership and under their rule. So yeah, quite often you can work for your existing factory, and then they're setting up production in those other countries as well. And that's always been the way as well, not just recently because of
Okay.
the tariffs. Like they have like Chinese have invested heavily in Africa and other places as well. I've visited a lot of factories in Vietnam as well, maybe 8 years ago, and I realized that the factories are a lot of them are run by Koreans, and like Korean names, Korean email addresses, Korean company names. And a long time ago, Koreans decided to go set up in Vietnam rather
Hmm.
than China. So there are like they're good at these types of things.
Yeah.
And
Okay. If I was a new seller, hypothetical situation, what do I do if I've got a product idea? What are the kind of next steps?
So the key principles is that you definitely want to have all your product ideas and information down on what's called a specification sheet or a tech pack, and that's so you're clear on what the product is that you're developing, because you don't want to approach a factory and say the product should be around this size and a little bit of this material, but maybe you can change it and the dimensions are around this. You want to be very specific so that you can say, like, this is an outdoor furniture chair, it's 80 by 40 centimeters, it's polyester material, it's nylon trimming, the poles are steel, the thickness of the steel is this. And like, if you don't know that, then you can buy samples of competitors and figure that stuff out. And if you want to iterate later on, you can still make changes, but it's very important for a factory, for them to give you accurate pricing. They have to know exactly what it is that you want, and you have to be clear on what you're developing as well. So I'd say stage one, get all your information down on a specification sheet. Then stage two is find the top 5 factories for your product, and that could be on Alibaba, that could be on Import Yeti, it could be finding them at the Canton Fair, and I've got tons of videos on my YouTube channel, Sourcing with Kian, which shows you how to find those things. But ultimately, just summarize the top factors on Alibaba. You want to make sure that they're verified, so third parties have gone in and checked that they are who they say they are. You want to make sure you're getting trade assurance, so your payments are protected. You want to know that that factory's been in business for more than 5 or 6 years. You want to know what certifications they have. You want to know the markets they supply, so that the majority of their exports are going to the markets that you supply, so they're familiar with the type of certification and quality levels that you have. So once you've identified who's the right factory to work with, then you can start to get pricing and samples and things like that. And the 2 most important things you should be concerned with is the price of the sample and the quality of the sample. And then once you have I would start by what is your favorite sample that you received in terms of quality, and then you can negotiate the price down. So if you received a price of like 450, 480, 5, 433, but your favorite sample was the one which was $5, you can say that, look, I'm happy to give the order to you, but just so you know, I've received the price of 450 and 433, so if you can match the price, then I'll give the order to you. And you know they're capable of doing it because all the suppliers receive the same information. So that way you still get your favorite supplier, but you also get the best price as well. And then from there, the best product development you can do is inside the factory later on. And like, when you're getting started, you just want to do 300 pieces as a trial order. Maybe it's a little bit too early to go to China. That money is better spent on your production and ordering more units. But if you really want to scale your knowledge and scale your production, then the next logical step is going to visit the factory to really understand who you're in bed with, essentially, because your supplier is your partner for the long term. And there's so many benefits of having a good supplier outside of price, in that they can put your items to the front of the production schedule, they can give you better credit terms, they can introduce new products to you, and you develop a genuine friendship as well with that business partner as well. That so many good things in my life have come from good relationships from suppliers as well. So yeah, that would be the main initial steps.
At what point would you say someone should go and visit the factory and boots on the ground in China?
I would say as soon as you validate that the concept works. Okay. So if you have a product and the first order went well and you sold out in 2 or 3 months, then the first thing I would do is go to China, because you want to now get the best manufacturer, not just the one which is willing to work with you. And then you want to make sure that you're getting the best price, but you also want to learn about the product development as well, because you can easily order a product online and just say, okay, yeah, that's good, and then sell it on another website online and say yeah, I'm getting sales, and then invest money in ads. But if you really want to add value to your customer, you have to understand how your products are made. And luckily, the first factory I went into was a backpack factory. So that really blew my mind, because I saw a backpack as before one unit in a shelf in a store. But when I saw it in the factory, I saw it in 30 different pieces. I saw the shoulder straps, the foam that goes in the shoulder straps, the webbing, the buckles, the zippers, the pullers, the inside lining, the waterproof coating. And I saw it in 30 different stages of production. So now if I've got an $18 product and I want to make it a $15 product, I've got 30 different places I can go to in my head, because I've learned about the product development process. So that's where you can add a lot of value to your customer and really grow your knowledge on the production by spending time in the factory, and not just going in the factory and looking in the room and smiling and say hello and just be all right, cool, let's go to the bar now. It's more so spend a full day there and learn everything about them and what all their capabilities are, and that will really help and grow and scale your product development skills.
Okay. You said there something about validating your product or validating your idea. What is the process for testing demand? How do you recommend people do that in the initial stages?
So there's 2 things. I mean, it depends whether you're branding or selling. right? So whenever people want to get started in the e-com journey, I always ask them, you plan on just selling products to make money, or do you actually want to build something and make money and build something to grow and exit? Because anyone who builds a long-term brand is that you're adding value to your customer by innovating in the products and adding value through the products, and then as a result of people loving your products, then it builds communities, and you have run clubs and all that sort of stuff, you have Facebook groups, and now whenever you launch a new product, they'll buy it because they like your brand.
Yep.
And they know that your brand understands their values and their wants and their needs, whereas other people can just find a trending product online, sell it, make money. They've got a 6-month window before it gets too competitive, and then they jump out of it. Both are okay, but one is a short-term thinking and one's a long-term thinking. And the one of the brand is building an asset which can be sold because it's got a loyal fan base, it's got an email list. The brand is the asset, and if you have any patents on the product as well, then you have defensibility, which then increases your multiple as well. So when it comes to like validating the product, if you're branding, there's less need to validate, because you could argue that if people love the brand so much that they'll just buy whatever you bring to market because they like your brand, right? Whereas if you have no brand and you're just flipping products on TikTok Shop or whatever, then you have to validate it in different ways to see like, okay, what's the search volume for this product? How many competitors are there? And I've never been a fan of that process, so I'm probably not the best to advise on that. But I've never ever in my life used a tool to see how many units should I be ordering and should I develop this product. Yep. I've always said, this is a customer buying the product. Here's how I can make the best possible product at the best quality, at the best price from the best supplier. So I know when the product comes out at the end of that they're going to love it. So I've never needed to like validate it. I've always just worked closely to develop the best for it. Because I always ask myself the question, what problem am I solving for the customer through this product? And what is my USP? What's my unique selling proposition over the market leader? And if I can answer those two questions, then I know it's going to be a great product, because I know it's better than what's already out there. Yep. So the marketing will take care of itself. But if I'm selling a product which is similar to what everyone else is doing, then that sort of research and keyword research and data is very, very important.
Okay. So you would say kind of pick the brand building route and its product development and build a community, and then you've got an asset that you can sell, and that's the key focus versus, cash flow business.
Yeah.
Where you got to analyze all these trends and data more.
Yeah, exactly. Because the other good thing about that, and each to their own, like some people like the other method, but you can also attract A+ talent into your business as well, because certain people love your brand and resonate with your values and what you're doing, that they want to be a part of that mission as well. And then if you want to get like C-suite people, then you can also offer them equity in the company and attract top tier talent by being able to offer them equity, whereas the guys which are just like flipping fidget spinners, they're not able to attract that talent, if you know what I mean.
No, for sure. Okay, so in terms of like analyzing factories or kind of making the decision there, what criteria are you looking at?
It's really interesting because there have been a lot of like AI tools like impacting different sectors and industries, and I know a few people which have sent me their AI tools for sourcing and product development, and honestly it never works, because at the end of the day, like, people buy from people, and these factories change over time as well, depending on who they work with, how busy their production line is, who they get an order from. So like my main criteria, it's like I view it as the horse and the jockey, right? So the horse is the factory. It has to have the certain criteria of the production line, the capabilities, and like the certifications, the number of years in business, the brands that they work for, the markets they export for. But a lot of factories are tick, 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 tick. But then it's the factory boss. Like, how do they run the factory, right? Because what sort of values do they have? And because I've been in situations with factories where we've been working for several years, and then there's been a big like mess up with a certain product, right? We've ordered a couple of containers, maybe it's $100,000 worth of stock, and the factory have messed something up. And then I always look to see, I'm not going to take legal action against them, because I'm not going to sue a factory in China for something which is over email, but I will see whether they accept responsibility for their mistakes or if they pass it off. So if they're like, yeah, sorry, I know there was an issue with the splitting of the soles on the footwear, but you should have picked that up.
It's your fault.
So it's your fault. I'm sorry, we can't do anything about it. That's just data. That's information. I'm like, okay, cool, understood. But I know that's not a factory I can build with for the long term. And sometimes I've had factories where they've missed the delivery date that we agreed on, and the products were for a retailer, and the retailer is going to fine us if the products don't hit shelf on a certain date, and we're going to be late. So I would say to the factory, you're now late, and there's going to be a heavy fine from the retailer, and I would either pass that fine on or say you need to air freight the goods at your own expense, so that we don't get that fine. And then some factories have said, yeah, but if I air freight this, then I make a $20,000 loss on the order. And I'm like, yeah, but you've missed the delivery date. And then they say, okay, fine, I accept. And then they'll take that loss because they value the long-term business, right? Because a lot of factories aren't concerned about how much money will I make from this order. It's how much money will I make with this customer over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And they're like, if we've been working together already for a few years and they like the way it's going, then they're like, well, okay, I'll take the hit right now because I've made a mistake, but at least for the long term, I'll make up for it because the business is going so good. So that's what I mean by the horse and the jockey. There's certain criteria with the factory, but then it's like who's the one making decisions in the factory as well, and then understanding who you're working with, and then there'll never be an AI tool which can figure that out. Or maybe we can clip this in 20 years time and maybe there is a tool which gets so sophisticated.
You eat your words, man.
Yeah. Got him. But as of now, that doesn't exist. So that's how that would be my tools and criteria for selecting a factory.
Okay, so you've got your kind of bare minimum like physical requirements. You've got do they take ownership and invest in the long-term nature of the relationship? And then I guess as well, it's, have you connected with them on a personal level?
Yeah.
Do they put you to the top of the list?
And like we talked about before, I have to add value to that person as well. So sometimes...
How do you do that?
It's a funny story. So I was just at home and I get a call from my factory. It's like, hey, Kian, can you jump on a quick call real quick? I was like, yeah, no problem. I was like nervous. I was like, is there a problem with the production? And then it was my factory boss, his name's Thomas. And he goes, can you help with my son's homework? He's 11 years old. I know him very well. I met him so many times. His name's Tony. And he was like, he's got his English homework, but he had asked his dad for help. His dad didn't know the answer, so he calls me, right? And then it was like a grammar question. They had it there, and they are.
Oh, my favourite.
Yeah. And it was like, it had the 3 words, and it's like, which word goes into the sentence with this context? And I was like, I don't know. But it was like they are playing, so it's like they and then apostrophe RE, and I was like, it's the one with the apostrophe RE. And he's like, cool. So then he writes it in, he gets a good mark in school, and then Thomas is like, thanks very much for helping with my kid's homework, you got a good grade. And I'm like, amazing. And then in the same way, I can also call Thomas right before Chinese New Year, and I say that, like, I know I gave you this order a little bit late, but these goods must ship before Chinese New Year. Can you put it to the front of the production schedule? And he's like, yeah, no problem. Because we have that friendship, right? And with a lot of these factory guys, like some of them are similar age to me, and we talk about politics, we talk about health and fitness, we talk about relationships, we talk, like, some of them are married and some of them have got kids, and we talk about family. So like we talk about everything, and we're very good friends. Like some of my suppliers have been to Scotland to visit me, some of them I've been on holiday with them together. Like they always give like nice gifts and meaningful and thoughtful gifts, and I take like customized whiskey bottle from Scotland for them. So like we have a very, very good relationship, but I know I can rely on them for anything, and they know they can rely on me as well. So that's the big fundamental. I've now got a factory's backing for my brand, which can really support me, rather than just ordering something online on Alibaba, talking to a sales assistant who doesn't know what they're doing and getting a delayed response,
So we talked about kind of the soft negotiation there and building the relationship. What about the kind of hard negotiation, and how do you look at kind of pricing and terms and have those kind of discussions with people? Yeah,
I mean, it has to be fair, right? And it has to be win-win. So there are times where, like, you negotiate price, but I would always frame it in a way that this is win-win. It's not like, hey, give me a better price because I want to make more margin. It's like, give me a better price so I can pass this cost saving onto my consumer, or I can invest more in marketing. And if I can invest more in marketing, I'll get more sales. If I get more sales, I'll place a much larger order to you and you'll get that order quicker. So it's like, give me the price discount, and rather than getting a PO for 10,000 pieces, it'll be 12,000 pieces. So they're like, okay, I can see what the upside is for me. It's the same way when you negotiate credit terms. It's like, right, I want after the goods land, I want 60 days credit. And they're like, well, that puts me out for like cash flow for 60 days. It's like, yeah, but the money that I would have spent on paying you for your order in those 60 days with that grace period, I'm going to use that to invest more into PPC or to marketing or to hire better level people or to spend on influencers. And as a result, we'll get a lot more sales a lot more faster. So then you'll benefit in the long term from larger orders. And I could even put a presentation together to show, if we don't get credit terms, this is how many orders you're going to get in a year. And this is the value of the orders. And if we do get credit terms, here's the orders, here's how much larger they are, and then here's the more output for your factory. So visually they can see, okay, well, if I give the credit terms, I'll get 180,000 units a year. And if I don't give the credit terms, I'll probably get about 100,000 units a year. Because a factory is relatively cash rich, they're like, okay, I'll just grant 60-day terms. I know you, I've known you for a while, I trust you. You helped me with my son's homework. So like, and yeah, I would love another 80,000 units per year. So it always has to be win-win, like not like I need a better price. And then they feel like they've lost. It's like, this is going to benefit you, and I'll show you how. And then they're way more in line. And that's, really a big part of what I do is work in partnership with suppliers. Not I'm the buyer, you're the supplier. It's like, we're in this together. What works for me works for you. This is win-win.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other terms that you'd look at apart from kind of payment and speed, or cost and speed, I guess?
Like quality of production as well is very, very important, because like factories that you don't have a good relationship can do something called the quality fade. And like, you might agree, $20 for a product, but after order 3, 9, 15, they'll start to take like little shortcuts in production and reduce the content. Like if you'd asked for like a 65-35 cotton polyester mix, then that might gradually fade to like a 50-50 mix, because cotton's more expensive, and you won't really notice these things, but maybe your fabrics will start to pill and deteriorate a little bit faster, and they won't go through a wash as well. So these types of things that like we might not notice, but if you have a good relationship, they won't do those types of like little tricks,
Okay. What is your take, and this is again for the kind of beginner level, what is your take on like trading companies or kind of going to agents versus direct to the factory, which is what we've kind of covered here?
Yeah, I would say both are okay, but it's very, very important to know who you're working with, because there's pros and cons of working for a trading company versus a factory. Like if you're just starting out small, you could work with one trading company, and like let's say for example you've got a fishing brand. That trading company can offer you the fishing rod, the fishing vest, the Wellington boots, maybe the inflatable boat, the bait, but those are 5 different factories. So if you went to those factories directly, you've got to talk to 5 different people. But if you work for a trading company, that one company can give you all those products, and they can group it for you together. They can brand it all together. They can put it in one container for you. So they will save you a bit of time. And yes, arguably you would get a slightly better price if you go to a factory directly, but what is the cost of your time by talking to all those different factories directly? But once you get to a certain size and scale, then you should be working with the factories directly. But a trading company can help you kickstart and launch a little bit faster. And there is sometimes a misconception that trading companies are more expensive because they add on a margin on top of what they get from the factory. But sometimes they get their kickback from the factory. So sometimes the prices can be very similar. We assume that if it's a $10 product, they're going to charge me 11 to make 10%. But actually it might be a $10 product, and the factory gives them $1 of their profit because they've brought in new business, and sometimes they take from both sides. So it's just important to know who you're working with, so you know what strings you can pull, so you know like what are the pros and cons of that relationship. But where people mess up is that they think they're working for a factory, but they're actually working for a trading company, and then they can't like a trading company. It's very unlikely for them to give you credit terms, because they're not the ones owning the workers, owning the stock, owning the fabrics, whereas a factory will give you credit terms. So you might be like trying. It's like, why am I not getting credit terms? But because I'm not working directly with the factory.
How do you figure that out if you're new?
By visiting, because they should be honest and they should tell you. But there's a couple of things you could do. Like one, you could visit a factory and just go see, because a trading company could still take you to the factory, but you know who's the factory boss by who's got the biggest office in the factory, and it will normally be like a 6-year-old fat guy drinking his tea, smoking a cigarette, and maybe doesn't speak too much English. So if you go down and just say, I want to talk to the boss, get a photo together, like have a sit down and chit chat, then you know like who's really running the factory. But another way you can find out is by not visiting China, is by talking to your supplier on WeChat, right? During their working hours when they should be in the factory. And then, like, let's say it's 10 a.m. their time, you're just texting them, hey, order status, everything good, that sample, back and forth, and then boom, video call them. And then they'll probably pick up to be like, yeah, cool, how's it going? Is everything fine with that order? yeah. And then I was like, hey, while I've got you on video, is it cool if you just take me down to the production floor real quick? I'd just love to see the production line in the sample room, and you know, what type of machinery that you got there. And if they're like, yeah, sure, no problem, let me show you right now, then it's like, well, they're in the factory, so they are a factory, right? Whereas if they're like, you know what, like I'm actually just out of the factory right now, but give me a call tomorrow and I'll show you tomorrow. Then it's like, well, you're probably not a direct factory, you're probably just working in an office, you know. So those little tells, you can start to figure it out.
So we are back for part 2 after a short intermission. Kian, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Cool. I want to kick off with just by talking about China. So I know you just got back from a trip.
Yeah.
How was it?
Amazing as always. You know, I tried to visit China several times a year, and this one I went for the Canton Fair, which is the largest import-export exhibition in the world. It's over 3 phases. It's got every category of product you can imagine. It's got over 26,000 suppliers there, but these are like the top tier suppliers, not just like the little shady ones that you see on Alibaba. So it's so important to go out and visit them and just sort of build relationships and sort of see the new products, discuss pricing, and especially at this time with the issue going on with tariffs, suppliers really appreciate you taking the time to, you know, go out there and visit them and sort of show face that business is still moving. So I hosted my first mastermind in China on this trip as well, which was really cool. Packed out the 4 seasons, got 50 people, just went over all my like sort of latest like strategies, and then the networking aspect of it was really cool because a lot of people go to China by themselves and they're on a journey by themselves, they're in a hotel by themselves, starting a business by themselves, but there's a lot of other people similar age to them on the same journey that they just want to connect with. So it was really cool sort of putting all those people together, and then you sort of see on social media the next day these guys are going to the fair together, they're going to factories together, they're working out together. So that was probably the coolest thing, to connect all these people.
Was that 50 brand owners you had there?
Yeah, and these guys were all selling on either Shopify, Kickstarter, or Amazon.
Okay. What does a typical day look like for you in China? Maybe if we can do, you know, when you're at the fair versus not.
Well, before any trip, I have an itinerary, and it's very important to decide what are the outcomes that I want to achieve on this trip. Mm-hmm. It might be I'm looking to launch 3 new products. It might be I've got a really good supplier, but I need better pricing. It might be that like I need better quality for this product, which is selling very well. So I always set like what are my objectives for the trip and then plan around that. And I would normally start with a few factory visits on the way. So first of all, I used to live in Shanghai. Shanghai is one of my favorite cities. So I started a trip in Shanghai, just went there for a little holiday, because you don't want to get off the plane with a bit of jet lag and tired to just go straight into business, straight into a meeting. You kind of need a day to sort of adjust to the time zone, and being back in China, get a good night's sleep. So I went to Shanghai for a couple of days and just did fun stuff, just kind of switched off from work a little bit.
What is fun stuff in Shanghai for people that don't know?
Yeah, you know what? Shanghai is just one of the coolest cities in the world. It's just one of those places where like it's just constantly moving forward. It's got an energy in the city, and I think the skyline is one of the most beautiful skylines that I've seen in my life. Like the architecture is phenomenal, and they've got everything from like really cool bars, restaurants, coffee shops to like people having the latest tech, the latest fashion. So I just like to people watch, you know, a little bit while I'm out there and just sort of see how fast it's growing and developing.
Okay, nice.
And then after that, sort of visiting factories, and the factory visits are pre-planned in terms of like what I want to achieve there. But I went to a sportswear factory, like for activewear, and there's a factory which makes for Fila, Gymshark, a lot of top like sport brands, and just sort of seeing the process start to finish. And I documented it this time for my YouTube channel because I wanted to show people from start to finish how garments are made, and then just sort of educate people on the process. And then went to a footwear factory as well, which was really cool for like sport and running shoes. And then headed to the Canton Fair for phase 2 and phase 3. And for the fair, it's like you're going to see hundreds of suppliers. You've got to keep an eye out for new products, but you need energy. Like, you know, you're walking around all day, and like after you've walked through all these different lanes and halls, sometimes the products can start to look the same. So you really need to have a fresh eye. And I documented all of that as well, turned it into some YouTube episodes. So yeah, it's going to be cool.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
How big is the Canton Fair for people that don't know?
The actual complex itself is larger than an international airport. Like it's overwhelming. Like I think if you're going for the first time, and that's like one of the number one questions I get, like, or like things that I see when people go for the first time, they're just a little bit like blown away to be like, I don't know where to start. This is overwhelming. So, you know, to get around that, it's really around getting comfortable, and the quality of questions that you ask determine the quality of your results. And if you are shy or a little bit nervous, it's important to start in a different category of product than of which you're going for. So for example, it's your first time and you're doing like sport and outdoor products, you might want to start in like the pet category. And just, you know, talk to the pet suppliers and be like, you know, what's the price of this product, and what certifications do you have, and what's the MOQ, and why is the MOQ that number, and which markets do you supply, and who's your biggest customer, and like what's the lead time, and just get comfortable with a bit of back and forth with suppliers, build up a bit of confidence, and then when you're ready, then go into the category of product that you're interested in.
So why is it important to visit China?
If you're not visiting your factories, you're not really building a brand, you're just gambling from a laptop. Like there's so many important aspects of visiting your factories and visiting China, but one of the most important ones for me is building relationships, because a lot of people think about, the price, which you can always negotiate and things like that, and you'll get better pricing when you see them in the factory or in China. But you have a chance to build up a relationship, not just with someone in the company, but with the boss, with the decision maker in the company. Because when you contact a supplier in Alibaba, you're talking to Sally 19 at Shanghai Profit, which is a sales associate which joined last year. But when you see someone in the Canton Fair, you're talking to the boss or the general manager or a decision maker, and you've got a chance to really build up a relationship with them and get to know them, go out for dinner together, get pictures together, showcase your samples and showcase your vision. And that really, really fast tracks your product development and supply chain, because fast forward a few months when it's Chinese New Year and you're trying to get your shipment out and it's stuck, and you can just call them up and be like, hey, I need a favor. I need you to put this item to the front of the production schedule. They know you, you went out together, like you broke bread together, you had a good time together. So they're more willing to do those types of things. And they're also willing to introduce new products to you as well, because while we're all product developers and we work on products, well, so do the factories as well. So their product team, their engineers work on stuff, and then they say, hey, you might want to try this for your market. This is going really well in Japan. We think it will work well for UK or for USA. So there's so many benefits of building a solid relationship and a solid foundation with your suppliers, which you just can't do from behind a laptop.
Okay. And would you say people should go to their factory or go to the Canton Fair to meet people?
I would say there's 3 levels to sourcing from China. Number 1 is online, like your Alibaba global sources. Number 2 is your exhibitions, like your Canton Fair. And number 3 is visiting your factory. And there's tiers to all of those things. Like, it's kind of like top of funnel, wide results. And then if you really want to become a professional, because the real brand owners, those are the ones like visiting the factories. So if you're sort of sourcing online and you're not getting the best results, you're not getting the best quality, you're not getting the best prices, next step, go out to the Canton Fair, meet as many suppliers as you can, showcase your samples, get the best pricing. And then after that, once you've got good pricing and good quality and good suppliers, but now you need like credit terms on your order, you have to discuss that face to face in the factory. And working in the factory also improves you as a product developer, because you see how your products are made from start to finish. Like the first time I ever went into a factory, it was a backpack factory, and I thought of it as one product in a store on a shelf. But when I saw it in the factory, I saw it in 30 different pieces. The shoulder straps, the foam that goes in the shoulder straps, the webbing, the buckles, the zippers, the pullers, the inside lining. And I just saw this process, step by step of it getting created. And now when I think of products, I think of it in 3D. So that's why it's so important to visit a factory and become an absolute best product developer. Because if I've got a $15 product and I need to make it $12, I've got 30 different places I can go in my head of where I can reduce the cost of that product. But if I'd never been to the factory and I just saw it as one unit, I don't have a clue how I can bring this price down. So it really, really improves you as a product developer. But you got to consider those 3 tiers. If you are just sourcing online, next step is get out to the Canton Fair. If you've had good results at the Canton Fair, next step, get out to your factory.
Okay, and will you be doing this regularly, hosting events, going out there so people can kind of follow?
Definitely, yeah. Canton Fair happens twice a year, every 6 months, every April and October. And I've not missed a Canton Fair since November 2010. So
wow.
I've done 28 in a row.
That's insane.
Yeah. The only ones I missed were when there was off because of...
the virus.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but...
Shadow ban now.
Yeah.
I want to kind of come back to what we talked about before on, China being the go-to source for, or the go-to hub for sourcing products. Do you think, given what's going on in the world today, it is still number 1?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the category of product, but I would say 90% of the products, like the go-to place is China. And it's very important to have like a China +1 strategy, meaning chances are China will be the best place to manufacture your goods, but you also want to know like where's the next best place in case things with tariffs kick off again, or even during COVID, factories shut down. I've even seen factories shut down like 15 years ago because of like factories giving off too much pollution. Wow. So a lot of things can change in your supply chain, and I'm not saying switch to another country, but you should know what's the next best country to go to. And that normally depends on what is the raw material in your product and which country specializes in that raw material. So for example, India is very strong for cotton, canvas, wood, leather, handcraft. So if you're doing like a leather biker jacket, then you know that India is a good place because they manufacture a lot of leather. So as long as you have a price of the product and a sample of the product, then you know if anything kicks off and you have to move outside of China, that you've already got a backup, you've already got it priced up, you've already got it sampled up, so you can then pull the trigger if you need to. But you're in a dangerous position if China shuts down for whatever reason, and then now you're scrambling, now you're looking for a new factory, now you're looking for a new country, now you have to go and visit this new place, now you have to get a sample, now you have to negotiate the price. So you can do all that work in advance and in preparation. But I would say like China is a go-to at the moment, and it probably will be for the next 10 years. but also these Chinese factories are also setting up production in other countries as well. So while I was just at the Canton Fair right now, with the whole tariff situation, Chinese factories were setting up production in other countries as well. So you can still buy from your manufacturing partners, but they've set up production in Thailand, in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, and they've partnered with factories there and set up a joint venture and moved their orders there and helped train their workers on their production techniques. So don't just dismiss your current factory, but work with them to find productions in other countries if it's becoming a challenge to manufacture in China.
Okay, and you say just go higher up the supply chain, so closer to wherever the raw material is your kind of advice there?
Yeah, and there's also an amazing tool called importyeti.com, which is totally free, which you can type in the market leader of your competition, and then it should show you what factories they're using and what countries they're manufacturing from and what HS codes they're using to import, and it's totally free as well. And I've got a demo video of it on my YouTube channel as well.
Okay. How do you recommend scaling supply chain for brands that you work with?
9 out of 10 ecom brands don't really know what their true landed cost is. And if you don't know your true landed cost, then how can you scale your business? So a lot of people just assume, oh, my profit margin is this, or I buy it for this price, I sell it for this price, my profit is roughly this. But really, you should know your landed cost down to the cent. And I've got a costings calculator, which I went over in one of my recent YouTube videos, and it literally figures out the cost of your product, the shipping cost, the import duty rate, the cost of the inspection, the cost of any molds, tooling, samples, the cost of any fulfillment to the final customer. And then you basically just put these in line by line, and it just automatically calculates for you what is your true landed cost. And that's basically the cost of from the factory to your warehouse down to the cent, what's the cost. And then once you know your selling price, you know exactly what's your margin and profit per unit. And once you know that, that's where you can start to look to scale your business, because there's so many different areas in your supply chain where you can optimize. For example, like your carton dimensions, you can modify your carton dimensions slightly so you can stack more units on a pallet. You can go from 800 units to 1,000 units on a pallet by asking your warehouse what's the maximum pallet storage height. So if the maximum storage height is 180 centimeters, but your boxes were 70 centimeters, then it was 70 by 70 is 140, but now there's 40 centimeters of space at the top. But now if you actually changed it to 60 centimeters, so you can go 60, 120, 180, now you've optimized that, right? So you've got more units in a carton, more units on a pallet, storage cost becomes less, shipping cost becomes less, and this is where you can optimize 1 or 2% in your supply chain, and you can do that across many different areas in your supply chain as well. But even getting access to what's called your BOM, your bill of materials, because a lot of people just look at their product and be like, okay, my product cost is $15. But actually, if you look at your bill of materials, and we go to the backpack example, you'll see, okay, the zippers are YKK, the buckles are Duraflex, the inside lining is nylon, the outside is polyester. Within the polyester, it's 600D. That's the denier of the threads, the weave and the weft. But if we look at, okay, well, now we want to change it from inside lining nylon to polyester, if we want to change YKK to SBS, if we want to change Duraflex to a local Chinese buckle, these are all things where we can save 50 cent, a dollar, 80 cent, and then it's then you can really bring down your cost of goods. So having your accurate landed cost, knowing exactly how profitable you are, having a bill of materials, working for a good freight forwarder, having a good inspection system, a very good sample process, reducing a lot of your returns. These are all things that we can improve in your supply chain to sort of take you to the next level and make you a lot more profitable, improve your positive reviews, reduce your returns, and these are all things that really show up in your profitability, and then also build you for an exit as well to get a higher multiple once you fix these things.
Okay, so what are some ways that you can cut costs in your supply chain?
Well, first of all, people focus on ads. You don't need a better ad, you need a better product. And the better product you have, the better your marketing will perform, because you can throw a lot of cash at ads, but if it's an unsuccessful product, then all of that's just going to come back as returns. So we really just want to improve the product first, make sure we've got the perfect product. And when I say perfect product, I go by PSP. You have to have the absolute best product from the best supplier at the best price. So things you can do on the product development process is, whether you're starting from scratch or you're taking a concept that the factory already has, you have to make sure that you are testing that product yourself first. You are the toughest critic of that product. And I never launch a product without being able to answer 2 questions. Is it, what problem am I solving for the customer? I have to make sure that I've solved. The best products are the ones that solve problems, and I have to say, this is the problem that we're solving for the customer. I'm not changing the color, I'm not just making it a little bit lighter, I'm not changing the material, I'm not changing the design, I'm solving a problem for a customer. And then I have to be able to say, what's my USP, what's my unique selling proposition over the market leader. And then with the suppliers, as we talked about with the Canton Fair or visiting the factories directly, there's so many different suppliers to choose from. Like in the fair, you've got hundreds of suppliers, but you want to align with the one which fits for your vision. You know, whether you're looking for an eco-friendly or sustainable brand, if you need lots of certifications, if you need ones that get into retail, if you want ones that really focus on product development and new opportunities, there's a lot of criteria that we can use for picking the right supplier. And then pricing, there's so many strategies that we can adopt in order to get the best price as well. But those are kind of the three things that you need to master: PSP, product, supplier, and price.
Okay. And on pricing, how do you get the best possible pricing from your supplier?
Yeah, so you have to have basically the market price before you can negotiate. So for any product that you have, it's very important to have a specification sheet for your product. And I would find the top 5 suppliers, whether it be online or at the Canton Fair, and I would send them all the exact same specifications. So let's just say it's an outdoor furniture chair. And we get pricing back, 570, 580, 560, 585. We know it's around that 5.7 price point, right? So now I know like how much room I've got to negotiate. But if I went to a supplier and I said, what's the price of this product? And they said $8 and I negotiated it down to 6.5, I'd be like, oh great, I just got $1.50 off the product. I'm an expert negotiator, not knowing that the real price was actually 5.7 because I got a range of pricing from top suppliers, but most importantly, they all received the same specification, so we can compare apples with apples. Because if you go on Alibaba.com and type in outdoor furniture chair, you'll see one which is $4, one is $8, one is $9, and you're like, oh, I'll just go for the cheap one. But not knowing that, like, they all look the same on the image, but some are nylon material, some are polyester material, some have got aluminium tubing, some of them got steel tubing, some are 80 by 40 by 40 centimeters, some are 60 by 30 by 30, some have got different carry bags. So like that's why you have to decide what product you want to launch based on what problems that you're solving for the customer, put all of that information on the specification sheet, and then give that same specification sheet to the top 5 suppliers, and then you know that that is actually the accurate price point because you've gone to the top reliable suppliers which have all the right certification, which have been in business for over 10 plus years, which supply the markets that you want to supply. So once I've got that data, then I can be like, right, now I can negotiate because I've got all the information in front of me. But I would never just go to one supplier, ask what's the price, negotiate, get $1 off, think I've done a good job, and then carry on. I have to find the top 5, get the market range, and then negotiate down from there.
Okay, so let's say you're kind of talking to the CEO of an 8-figure brand and they've never really looked at their supply chain before. What would you say to them in terms of how to kind of audit and then optimize?
Yeah, I would say what got us here won't get us there. And what I've noticed with a lot of 7 and 8-figure brands is that they outgrow their supplier, meaning the first time you started the business online, you found a supplier in Alibaba, they were the only one which would do your MOQ of like 500 pieces, but then you've grown and scaled your business and you're now you go from like 1,000 pieces a month to 2,000 pieces a month to now 10,000 pieces a month, but then maybe you haven't renegotiate with your supplier. Maybe you haven't found or discussed, is it still the best supplier for me? Because you want to be looking at the number of workers they have in the factory. And that first supplier which gave you that low MOQ, maybe they've only got 50 workers in the factory, 2 production lines, 25 machines. But there are factories out there which manufacture for the biggest retailers in the world that have 800 workers in the factory, 25 production lines, numerous sites, factories in different countries, and like that is now the best partner that you should have in your supply chain. But if you haven't gone to China, if you haven't really evaluated your supply chain, your lead times might be increasing, you might not be getting the best price. But this is where you have to constantly, every time you level up, you need to just ask yourself, am I working for the best quality supplier? And going back to the specification sheet, you want to be finding like the top 5 suppliers online or at the Canton Fair. You want to be giving your specification sheet and then sharing it with those other suppliers, getting a sample, getting the price, getting the lead time, and then if it is time for you to move on, don't burn any bridges with your existing supplier. You can phase them out of like 10,000 units a month, then it can go to 5, then 3, then 2, then 1, as you give this new supplier 1,000 pieces, 2,000 pieces, 5,000 pieces, 10,000 pieces, and then gradually like phase them out. And then you can also tell them the reasons why you have to leave, and then it's up to them if they can figure something out in order to keep you, and I would always give them the chance. But you have to constantly look at your supply chain to be like, am I working with the best partner? Because if you're not, ultimately you're just leaving money on the table. You're leaving your growth behind. So you have to always make sure you have the best partners.
Okay. I want to talk now about kind of eco-friendly products. How does that work in kind of your process, and is this something you can do in China?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of my favorite YouTube videos I ever made was how to make your brand more eco-friendly, and I gave like 15 different tips of how to, because it's something I'm very passionate about as well. The video didn't perform too well, maybe it got like 5,000 views, but it was one of my favorite ones that I put out. But I always say in China you can make anything that you want. So if you want to be very sustainable and eco-friendly, like let's say you're doing a t-shirt or a backpack or a sleeping bag or whatever, and if you want recycled polyester material, then they can buy that recycled polyester material. You should also get certifications on that, so you can get RPET, recycled polyester, from the Global Recycled Standards. So you have the certification to know. And the price of this recycled polyester is actually very similar to the normal polyester. So it could just be like 5 to 10% more expensive on the materials, but 5 to 10% cost on the materials is actually not too much. It's only maybe 2 to 3% higher in the cost of goods, because that, like if your product is more like labor intensive, then most of the cost is like cut and sew and stitching and skilled labor and things like that. So it's really not that much more expensive, but that's a great part of your marketing story to say that you have like organic materials, recycled materials, your products come from an environmental source. And then you can also join something called SEDEX, which allows like global responsibility in supply chain. So if you were the retailer and you were buying from me, you would have visibility of my full supply chain, which factory I'm working with, where the raw materials came from, and then is the paper of the packaging coming from an FSC certified factory. So you have like full visibility in your supply chain on the eco-friendly and recyclable standards.
Okay, nice. Can you just talk to kind of IP and what brands can do to protect their intellectual property?
Yeah, for sure. There's a few things you could do. Like one, get your supplier to sign an NNN agreement, which is non-use, non-circumvention, non-disclosure. And as long as the contract's written in both English and Chinese, and they stamp it with the red company chop, then it's legally enforceable in China. And if you need a copy of that, reach out to me. And then you can also file a patent on the product, whether it be a design patent or a utility patent. Design patent, $4,000, utility patent, $15,000. But sometimes you don't want to pay that expense if you don't know whether the product will be a hit or not. So I would always suggest like telling the manufacturer you're going to work with that I have a patent pending on this product, and you can file a provisional patent for $100, which gives you, I think, a 1 year time frame for you to go and actually process the payment. But it gives you a chance to launch the product and know if it will be successful before you carry forward with that patent. And always write on your listing and on the packaging, patent pending. So if a supplier or if a competitor or a customer sees your product and they think that's something I want to copy, then they won't, because they say patent pending, but the patent hasn't come through yet, so they don't know what's been protected. Mm-hmm. And then also if you have a mold on your product as well, you can also, like the tooling, you can always put your logo on the mold. So for example, if you have to pay $15,000 for tooling, but you put your logo embossed on it, then that supplier can't then use that mold for another brand as well, because it has your logo on it. And also just really building trust and relationships with the factories that you've got as well. And you can also get an exclusivity agreement with your supplier, because while we develop products, so do our suppliers. Yeah. And the suppliers, if you see something that they have and they've made, then you can ask them for exclusivity. And if they say no, you can ask them for exclusivity in 3 ways: by time, by region, or by quantity. So give me exclusivity for 90 days, and then at least you have that 3-month window. Or give me exclusivity by region, like give me Australia or give me UK, and then you can supply to anyone else. Or give me exclusivity by quantity. First order I'll do 5,000 pieces, next I'll do 10,000 pieces, and if I keep going up in increments of 5,000, then I keep the exclusivity. So that way you have protection and first mover advantage for even a product that they've developed as well.
Okay. Final question, packaging. How important is it, and what should people be doing?
Yeah, packaging is definitely a part of the product process. So whether you're going for like a premium brand, then you want to have a premium experience, which packaging is a part of. Packaging can also be a feature of the product as well. So it could be, if it's a yoga mat, it could be a carry bag with a shoulder strap, which is used to transport the product, but it's also used as a feature of the product as well. And I always give my manufacturer the first chance to make the packaging that I want. First of all, what are the options that they make? If I don't like any of it, then I'll say, well, I like this packaging, can you make that? And they have partner factories. Like, they don't necessarily make the packaging, but they have partner factories which do. And if I like the solution, then great. I still only talk to one supplier and I get the full product. But if I'm like, no, I still want the packaging to improve, then I'll go and find a packaging factory directly myself and then specify what I want. And then I'll send the packaging to the factory that I'm working with.
Okay. Kian, that brings me to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for coming on. It's a lot of knowledge you've dropped, and I appreciate you taking the time.
No worries, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Where can people kind of find you and get in contact or follow along with?
Sure. Instagram, I'm quite active. You can just check out Kian_JG on Instagram. Also LinkedIn, Kian Golzari. If you want to join my sourcing school, it's just school with a K, school.com/sourcing with Kian, and also the YouTube Sourcing with Kian. And I'd be greatly appreciated if you subscribe to the channel.
Cool. Do you want to just do a quick plug for that? Because I know you've got that coming up. Is it next month?
Yeah, sure. So it's 9th and 10th of July in Barcelona. And Affiliate Takeover is a new event for all affiliates, and it's going to be branching into a bit of e-commerce as well. So if anyone's got an affiliate offer, or if anyone wants to send traffic to their e-com store, it's definitely the place to check out, and it's going to be a lot of cool speakers there.
It looks like a really good event, so yeah, check it out.
Awesome.
Cool. Kian, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. All the best.
Scaling an e-com brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.